Sexual energy is creative energy. It represents the ability to create things from a sense of how you think, how you feel, and how you express those thoughts and feelings. When we think about sexuality as it pertains to spirituality, manifestation, new age thinking, we often kind of skip or glaze over the topic of sexuality and the importance of sacred intimacy. And it becomes or has become a conversation that is more fringed, like more on the outskirts of spirituality, when in fact it should be a main focus of spirituality. We all, as an adults, have experienced sexual intercourse, have experienced intimacy. And it's very important to recognize the spiritual significance of that exchange and other exchanges moving forward. In fact, I invite you to think about sexuality in itself as a element of spirituality, as a big component of how you express, how you align, and how you manifest things on a spiritual plane of existence or a spiritual, reality. So this isn't really to get into spirituality suggesting that sexuality should be repressed. This isn't to get into the suggestion that sexuality should be indulgent. Okay. This is about recognizing the balance and how important it is to understand that the experience of sex is one that is sacred. And with all things sacred, it's important to encompass balance as you indulge, as you express, as you experience, right? Even as you decide to repress, because there are those who, at particular moments in their lives on the spiritual journey, when people decide to be celibate, people decide to abstain from sexual intimacy and intercourse. Then there are moments and places and moments in time where individuals decide to indulge, to really go deep within exploring sexuality and experiencing it in a multitude of ways to really go deep within themselves. So you have these two, what seems to be opposite experiences of sexuality, to reject it or to refrain from it, right? To restrict oneself from engaging in it. And then you have the other side of the spectrum where we want to indulge in it in order to have a particular experience. And both of those can still exist from the standpoint of wanting to go deep within yourself. Okay. And to really recognize who you are, right? So the spiritual journey is one of a subjective point of view as to what you think you need to look at within yourself and the things that you need to experiment with when it comes to sexuality, when it comes to your thoughts, emotions, when it comes to recognizing consciousness. But in this topic, when it comes to sex, there are infinite ways that you can decide to look at sex in a way that supports you in the unfoldment of recognizing who you are as a spiritual being, as a divine being, you see? So the idea here is to recognize that intimacy is spiritual, especially when it's approached from a place of consciousness, when it's approached from a place of mindfulness, right? So you have to be really conscious about this journey, just like everything else, this aspect of the journey, just like everything else. You really want to recognize, what does it mean to you? Okay. If that meaning is one that creates and supports negativity, then you might want to question, does that meaning serve you? And if you can change the meaning, if you can change your identity and the role you play and how you feel about the role you play when it comes to this thing that is fundamental, right? Without sexual intimacy, without sex, we wouldn't be able to experience this gift called life. And so you have to understand the importance of it and not neglect it and not push it aside because you feel like people have corrupted the nature of it or you feel like it's taboo. It isn't. It is your very nature as a human being to experience intimacy, to experience sexuality, and to share that with people, with others, right? That you are compatible, that you are aligned with in various degrees. You see, now, the main thing, though, is to recognize that sexual energy is a creative force, right? And we learn this in school. We learn that when two people get together and they are intimate and they have sex, they then can create another human being out of it, multiple human beings out of it, right? So we understand just there at face value that sex means that people, human beings, right, this physical body, which is an amazing miracle in itself with all the things that it is doing and can do, that we create this human body, right, this vessel, this temple, which houses consciousness, right? Which houses an individualized expression of that which we call God inside of it. So that way it can live out its purpose and thus create anything that it desires to create for itself in order for it to truly come into understanding as to recognizing that they are an expression of the divine. Because that's what we're here to do. We're here to simply remember who we are. You know, we're not here just to materialize money. We're not here just to materialize that car or that house or that lifestyle or that amazing relationship. We are here to do all of those things along the path of self-realization and recognizing who you are. You see? So sexual energy is life force energy. But it doesn't just consist of the life of a human body, right? It doesn't just consist of the life of this physical form that we call a body, a temple, a vessel. It also encompasses life being an expression. You create, okay? You're using the same energy that you would to create a human being to actually create your desires, to create your goals, to create your purpose. It's the same essence, it's the same energy. It's just you are using it from the perspective of different sides of the polarity. Remember, when it comes to the universe, it consists of contrasts, the polarity of two things or two sides of one thing, the spiritual and the physical, all right? The intangible and the tangible. And so what we have learned about sexuality and sexual intimacy is that what it does, it creates the physical body. Yes, but on a spiritual level, because the physical body is on the physical level, right? But on the spiritual, intangible level, which is the most powerful level, right? The highest frequency of this spectrum that we're talking about, this polarity that we're talking about, it is in fact the part that we use to create our ideas, our goals, our dreams, right? It is the part of us that pushes forward in creating the life, the reality, the universe that you wish to create. So when somebody decides to say, go abstinent and sustain from sex and intimacy, what they are trying to do is cultivate and create a space where they can concentrate that energy toward something, even though sometimes they may not know what it is, but they want to have a particular experience, an unfoldment, a realization, you see? And so that's why people often do that, is to cultivate that energy to create an experience that they feel like they may not be able to experience on the other side of the spectrum, right? Which is being sexual. Now you have those, though, who feel like and understand that they can also have the experience of unfoldment, the experience of creation by being sexual, by engaging in that energy, by stimulating the energy, by building up the energy, by sharing the energy, by releasing the energy. You see? So things can happen no matter what side of the spectrum you're on. And so we have to honor that with people. We often think that if somebody is sexually active, that they're lesser than, that they have no sense of self control, right? And though that may be the case for a lot of people, there are those who are sexually active and really are mindful, intentional, and look to master the energy of sexuality. So we have to respect that. But nonetheless, the energy of sexuality, though they can exist on a spectrum, when it is focused, okay, it creates everything. All that is created and around us is a result of a sexual energy, is the result of two things coming together, right? Synchronizing, being in harmony and balance, thus creating something new. All right. When you plant a seed, you must plant it in the ground. Those are two things that come together. Eventually, over time, that seed begins to gestate, it begins to sprout, and it begins to grow something. Okay. You can look at that as the child or the manifestation or the materialization of your goal or dream, depending on what side of the spectrum you want to think from. You see? So, sexual intimacy, it creates physical life. Okay. Sexual energy creates physical life. It also creates emotional bonding where you connect with somebody on an emotional level. And it doesn't have to be a romantic relationship, right? It can also be, there are many layers to sexual energy. It doesn't have to be one of just simply wanting to express yourself physically with another person. It can be just simply recognizing the energy within another person and understanding the compatibility between you two. You see, compatibility in itself is an expression, is evidence of a chemistry. Okay. And that can be looked at as sexual. Now, nowadays, we don't really want to get into this idea that there can be chemistry between two people, even though they may not be physically, right, attracted to one another, but, or their sexual orientation may not be compatible. But when you recognize two people have a connection, they have a chemistry, they have a vibe with one another, where they can really get along with one another, be in sync, be in harmony with one another. Though that isn't a physical, sex or expression of sex, it is still the energy being used there, you see? So you have to recognize that there are multitudes of levels when it comes to how we define sex and sexuality and sexual intimacy, you see? So there is just the very spiritual nature of sex where two people simply get along, they have a vibe, there's a connection, they want to hang out with each other more, right? Then you go all the way down into more of the physical aspect of sex, where there is a physical sexual chemistry. There is also emotional chemistry, right? And those two want to have the physical connection and experience with one another. You see? So the point here is that sexuality is something that is vast and something that you should always look to explore from one degree or another, right? From one side of the spectrum to another, because it lends itself to recognizing you as a creator. You see, sexuality is the energy that actually allows us to create. And when we think about the fact that when two people are intimate and having sex and they can create a child, then when you think about what does sex mean exactly? What does it represent? is the question you should be asking yourself. Now, proper sex, when we are talking about two individuals, maybe more, of people who are connecting, they are mutually involved in this experience and they are wholeheartedly involved, meaning they are involved physically, mentally, and spiritually. So we're talking about 100% consent in the experience of sexuality. And when people come together in that experience, they essentially are expressing the physical experience of what we call love. You see, now this is what I mean. Love is the spiritual essence of sex, whereas sex is the physical essence of love. So when you are properly utilizing the experience of physical intimacy and sex, what you are supposed to be doing is really expressing love for the individuals that you are intimate with. Now, love doesn't have to be in a box. That can look like a multitude of things, right? Love doesn't mean you're in a relationship necessarily. Love doesn't mean that, you even really know each other necessarily. It just simply means you see one another and you honor one another and you wish to express your admiration, your affection for that person in that moment. So it is a practice of being in the moment with the person, you see. And then again, there are multitudes of different degrees of what that looks like. That's why the consent is very important, because the consent means you are communicating with clear understanding and intention as to what it is you wish to experience, how you wish to express it, how you wish to share, and what it is you desire to receive. So the consent part really defines the understanding of love there, okay? It's about respecting the person. It's about honoring the God within them, just like you are honoring the God within you and you wish to honor, for them to honor the God within you as well. You see? So there's four things happening there. You see? You honoring the God within you honoring the God within them honoring the God within them honoring the God within you. Okay? Four represents stability. That's exactly what you are to and supposed to experience when you are properly engaged in the sexual act of expressing love. Very important you understand that. You see, the same energy used in intimacy, it also fuels things like ambition, things like the expression of art and purpose. So when we get into how to utilize this sexual energy, you can utilize it, and you are utilizing it every single day. You just have been programmed perhaps to think that it is only when this thing happens, this sexual act of intimacy happens, that sexual energy is in play. This energy is activated. But the energy is always there because you are always a creator. And in order for you to create, there must be some implementation of the sexual energy being directed toward something, toward a goal, toward an ambition, toward an idea, toward an expression. You see, now when we think about the fact that we're always using this energy, there are times, though, when we misuse the energy, and that energy often leads to confusion. And the reason why we're often confused is because we are not getting true clarity as to what it means to have this energy, to generate the energy, and to express the energy. So you have to think in terms of When it comes to sex, what is your thought processes about it? What is it? When it comes to this sexual energy, what is it? When it comes to intimacy, what is it to you? Okay. Then identifying how can you productively direct this energy? And when I say productively, I'm not just talking about the physical, biological experience of, say, an orgasm. What I'm talking about is what the energy creates on a very metaphysical, spiritual sense. What's truly happening there? What can you do with what's happening there? All right. What are you doing with what's happening there? If you're engaged in sexual activities because that's all you know, right? And it's only to simply obtain a momentary physical experience of, say, an orgasm, but you don't get along with the person, you don't really like the person, you just simply are attracted to them physically, or you just have a yearning and a desire to have an orgasm. Well, that's where the confusion shows up, because that's going to express itself throughout the rest of your life. And because you are utilizing that sexual energy in a way that is misguided and misdirected, misused, then it is going to again multiply the experience that you're having with that person throughout your life, because that energy is so potent, especially during the time of intimacy. So you must be mindful about who you're being intimate with. There's nothing wrong with wanting to have a momentary sexual experience with a person, regardless of what the nature of your relationship is with them, as long as there is consent, as long as you are both in agreement, as long as you both understand the situation and have a clear idea as to what comes next, right? Or what is to be expected after that. Because oftentimes people assume if you have sex, then that means you're in a relationship. So clarity, communication is very important. And that also lends itself to how things show up in the rest of your life. So be clear, because when you're clear in that and you're building up that momentous energy, that frequency that is constantly generating and building up, and then you release that energy, you are sending a strong signal out into the universe, out into the universe that you're creating, and it is basically aligning you with the way of being from which you sent out the impulse. So you have to be mindful about that energy, mindful about the signal you are exploding out, almost literally, right? So don't misuse the energy, okay? Because it's going to create a lot of confusion for you, because then you're going to say, well, I want this in my life. I'm doing all these things. I'm thinking about this thing. I'm matching my energy or my emotions with this thing. But when it comes to your sexual intimacy, how are you directing that energy? How are you directing that creative force and essence? So it takes mindfulness and awareness in all things, especially these things that we often discredit or we don't associate with spirituality. And sex is one of those big things that we all do and experience. At least 99% of us do. So be intentional about how you do it. Ask yourself the question, like, am I using this energy consciously or unconsciously? Because that's going to allow you to really just think about it, right? This is not a moment of feeling shame or feeling bad, right? This is a moment of contemplation and recognition that, hey, if I am not using this energy mindfully, this experience mindfully, how is this showing up in my life? You see? So it's important to be clear for yourself. It's important, it's imperative to be clear with your partners, because that is part of the agreement that we all have as creators. When we bond with another creator, we have to recognize one another, and we have to recognize the divine in one another, and we have to honor that. And that's what consent is about. Consent is not optional. Okay. It is foundational. It is fundamental in the process of creation, creating a momentary, beautiful experience that also radiates out, spreads out into the universe to create a beautiful, long, life-lasting experience. Integrity means that you're honest about your intention. And you will be surprised. You think that, well, if I only want to have this sexual experience one time with this person, will they understand that? When you are honest, when you are transparent, you will be surprised at the people who will hear you, recognize you, and link with that. They will align with it. So there's no need for lying. There's no need for being manipulative, because that, again, is going to show up in the rest of your life. If you are being a liar and a manipulative person, then you are going to send that frequency. You're going to send that out into the universe. And guess what? The universe is going to give that back to you. Why? Because you and the universe are one. So however you're being, the universe is going to be. You see? So it's important to recognize love in the way that is pure, because that's what it is. Love is pure. And when you are expressing love, whether it's momentarily, whether it's lifelong, you should never be ashamed of it. Okay? Sexuality, it is not dirty. It is not sinful. And shame distorts the intimacy. Shame makes things more corrupted. And we don't want that, because sexuality, intimacy is one of our most amazing gifts as living as human beings here. And so suppression, that leads to, issues of insecurity and dysfunction. So we do not want to suppress this nature of ours. We want to understand it. We want to honor it. Because as a creator, sexuality is a part of that creative impulse, that creative expression, right? That creative formula, the mechanism, the paradigm. You see? So always be conscious, because conscious expression always lends itself to more clarity, happiness, right? The ability to understand that you are free to love, you are free to express, right? Without guilt, but simply with the practice of awareness. That's the beauty of all of this. Freedom is something that we should experience with a sense of responsibility. So with this understanding of how sexuality is a beautiful thing that you are always using to some degree, whether you know it or not, it's very important to see that in order for you to utilize this power, you have to respect the power. Okay? You have to honor it, because you're free. You're free to express your love. You're free to express your sexuality, right? But freedom also includes accountability. It includes integrity. It includes transparency, right? Especially as we talk about consent, because trust me when I tell you, the best sexual experiences across the board are the ones that are experienced with 100% consent between two people. you know. Now, emotional consequences, that's a real thing. And we can often get our hearts involved in a way that lends itself to attachment or an expectation. That's when you have the opportunity to look within yourself and ask yourself the question, why? Now, when we are completely transparent and we are people practicing people of integrity, transparency, and consent, then we basically lay everything out on the table, make it clear. Sometimes, though, making it clear isn't the thing that actually happens, right? Because people get involved in their feelings, and that's okay. But what it is an opportunity for you to acknowledge that the experience that you had was such a beautiful one that you would like to experience it over and over and over again. And if somebody you are intimate with doesn't desire that, then honor them, honor the experience. Be grateful that the experience happened in the first place. You see, that would allow you to simply move on, to simply let it go. To a degree, you don't want to forget, of course. We never want to forget a good sexual experience. But understand that when we are able to let things go, we allow for ourselves, the universe, to create better experiences. But when we hold on to something, when we fight to keep something that doesn't want to be kept, we prevent ourselves from experiencing the infinite possibilities of this infinite universe. You see? Now, energetic bonds, those are real as well. So we understand and think about, when we have sexual intimacy with other people, like, wow, this person was amazing. And then you can have that, like you can carry that bond with somebody and still not be in communication with them. And that's completely fine. And in fact, that's a beautiful thing, you know, but the connection needs to be rooted in love, not impulse, you know? So when you recognize the power of intimacy, you understand that it allows you to also have dignity when it comes to expression, this sexual expression, you know, and you carry yourself with an air of royalty, regalness, because you have complete self respect for yourself, you know. Intimacy should elevate. It should never diminish, you know. Your body is sacred. It is your temple. And so whatever you do with that body, with your body, should be with the intention of recognizing the divinity within you that you are, and that sexual intimacy should ultimately be the intention of the divine coming together as one for a moment to express love and gratitude for the oneness that you are. Thank you so much. Peace and abundance always.